Why don't you just give listeners a brief introduction?
I'm Thomas Henderson. I'm a family manager and a coach for young adults, teenagers who are, getting out of treatment, transitioning back to the quote unquote real world. Yeah, I mean, it's a long journey, obviously, that brought me to this point. Struggled a lot with addiction, mental health, in and out of treatment centers, hospitals, legal trouble. I feel like I can use all of that experience to help other people.
Sweet. All right, so let's get straight into it. Take me to the first time you drank or did drugs in a way that you would consider the start of your addiction.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I can pretty vividly remember it. My whole life quite literally changed after that moment. I would say like I was either 11 or 12. Throughout middle school, I had been struggling to fall asleep. I could not get my mind to quiet, my body to calm down at the end of the day. And I just remember I had an iPod Touch at the time. And I remember like sitting in my room looking up one night at like probably 2 or 3 in the morning, like, how do I fall asleep? A bunch of different things pop up, but one of the top things was different over the counter medicines, Nyquil, things of that nature. And I just knew that we had that already in the house. Went and got some of the Nyquil and brought it back to my room. And that night I just like took like probably like double the amount that I was supposed to take. I passed out and I slept through the whole night. I woke up. Wow, like I finally just got like a full night of sleep, like flipped a switch in my brain where I was like, okay, this is now what you do to fall asleep. And it was really pretty simple and honestly like innocent in a way. Like I wasn't like trying to get high. I wasn't trying to like do anything bad. I was literally just trying to go to sleep and it worked. So I kept doing it. I did know that like what I was doing was somewhat wrong. So it wasn't like completely innocent. So I was like hiding it. The little wrappers of the NyQuil, I would put them in a shoebox and put it under my bed. And then eventually, like, there was no NyQuil left in the house. So had to start seeking out other ways to get it. Yeah, it pretty quickly led to me starting to do like more addictive behavior things. Like, drove my bike to the local Publix and pocketed some NyQuil and walked out the store.
Do you think that there was something inherent in you before you even started looking up how to fall asleep that was already the addictive personality type? Because I'm just thinking of like other kids I knew growing up who would have trouble falling asleep. They'd try, those guided meditations. What made you turn to, I need meds?
Since I was probably like 9 or 10, it was like I can't like quiet my mind. Like my parents would be going to sleep and, I'd be in my room, like rearranging my room. All my shoes had to be perfectly lined up. To me, it was like organized chaos. And I just like would obsess over it. And like basically every week I would like move where my bed was in my room, move the chair, like move my dresser, and was just constantly like not satisfied with my sleeping arrangement. Like I would literally be like laying down about to fall asleep and I would like think of something in my room that I needed to go fix, and then I would have to get up and do it. And then I would just be up from that point on.
Because it's almost like your space was a metaphor for your mind. Like you could
Yeah.
not organize and control your mind. So you're like doing whatever you can externally.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I completely agree with that though. It is kind of like a representation of your mind. I was always trying to keep it organized, but it was like chaotic.
So then you got into harder drugs and it
Yeah.
spiraled and got worse and worse. What would you say when you look back on it is the moment that was like really ugly? It was like a really ugly time.
I was probably, again, like 14 or 15, and it escalated way beyond NyQuil. Like at this point, I was, doing prescription drugs. Every house I went to, I would, get into the cabinets, take the whatever pills I could find. There's this 24-hour period. My grandfather had like just passed away. I just remember I was on like a bunch of Xanax at this time, just taking Xanax basically on a daily basis and like wasn't really present during the whole process of him passing away. I barely remember like the funeral or any of that stuff. It's like 2 weeks later, it was actually on Valentine's Day. My parents were going out for the night, so I was staying with my grandma, who is the wife of my grandfather who just passed away. And I, had a bunch of pills on me and it was just me and my grandma. My grandma goes to sleep. I take a bunch of pills and then I like, went down into her kitchen, went into her purse, got her checkbook, took a bunch of her cash. I was big on like Catch Me If You Can at the time, that movie. I had this idea that I could take her checkbook and like basically create false checks. And I went and I I like found her signature somewhere in the house, took it up to the bathroom, and I like turned on the shower because that's what I would do every time I was using it at home. Like I would go into a bathroom, turn on the shower, get high. So I was basically like sitting on the bathroom floor trying to like forge checks, and I had like pills crushed up on the counter, and the shower's running, and I passed out. Like I fainted in the bathroom. Obviously, there's like a loud thump that happens when I fall. I'm like unconscious. And then I wake up to like my grandma banging on the door. She figures out a way to open the door, and I'm literally just like laying on the bathroom floor. There's pills crushed up on the counter. There's like 10 checks on the ground with her name written on it. And I just never forget like her looking down at me in that moment. I basically just like got up and like ran out of her house. My parents' house was maybe like a half mile down the road. I ran back to our house. I was like in a manic state. My parents weren't there, started breaking stuff. They eventually got called from the party they were at, had to come to the house. My grandma came with them, and I was just like breaking stuff in their house. And my dad like comes in, he tries to stop, like, like physically stop me from doing what I'm doing. And I like went and grabbed a knife. Now I'm like running around the house, like saying like, I'm gonna kill you or I'm gonna kill myself. Like one of those is about to happen.
Did you mean it?
In the moment, I think I meant it more so like toward myself. Like I was just like, I was already like sick and tired of this. I hadn't really experienced any treatment or anything yet, but like I was already just like tired of this chase that I was on. Like even like the checks and all that, that was just like an expression of trying to fulfill this addiction that I now had. I'm like screaming at the top of my lungs, holding this knife in the corner of my room. My parents are freaking the fuck out. And I just like eventually like curled up in a ball and was like in a state of shock. And my dad gets the knife out of my hands. They're like, what do you need? And I was like, just like take me to the hospital. And my mom's like holding me in the back of the car. My dad drives us to the hospital. And then I end up going to emergency room and get put into the psych unit for probably like 8 days. That's probably like the first time that all the shit just hit the fan. My parents were somewhat oblivious to everything I had been doing. Like they at certain points found the Nyquil pills and all that, but they were not aware of like the level that I was at, stealing checks, stealing money, all of that stuff. And it really just opened their eyes to like what became like years and years of this kind of behavior. And for me, it was like the first moment that kind of like shook up my world around like I'm not normal in my head. Like whatever I've got going on, I was in a psych ward with like people who I was like looking at them. I'm like, you guys are crazy. But then I think about what I did to end up there. I'm like, I'm also fucking crazy.
You used the word chase. Do you think you were chasing something or running away from something or both? And what were those things?
The quick answer would be like running away from like the thoughts in my head that were just like, just felt so intense at that age. And I could not voice them. Like I couldn't get them. I didn't know how to talk about it. Like without yelling and screaming, there was like no way for me to like articulate it in a way that like made sense to anybody, and it's funny, obviously, that I'm like a big runner now. I quite literally like at night, one of the things I would have to do is like like we had an alarm system at our house. I would have to like wake my mom up and have her let me outside so I could literally just like sprint back and forth on the street just to like get that extra energy out. And it wasn't necessarily just like this physical letting out. It was like quieting my mind. Doing that would give me this like sense of relief. Like none of my friends are having to do that. So I'm like, I would ask them like, hey, like this is like what I have to do at night to get to sleep. Like, do you resonate with this at all? They're like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
I had the same thing. You know how much energy expenditure you have to have by basically doing fucking burpees around the house all the time? There's this restlessness. Do you think
I have really tattooed on my leg. Says
really
restless.
restless?
Yeah.
What are we restless about?
I've definitely like, gone back and forth in my head about that. Like in sixth, seventh grade, those types of actions led to them like pushing like the ADHD meds and all that on me. Cause that's kind of like where that goes, like if you're pacing around in the back of the classroom, constantly having to walk around the halls, can't pay attention, whatever. And that means like you have ADHD, you need to be put on meds so that we can calm you down basically. And I was always resistant to it just cause yeah, like I wanted to be more chilled, but I also didn't want to be like a zombie, which like I saw my other friends who are already on those meds. They would barely even talk during school. And I like didn't like that. I just remember when I got put on it, that kind of lit a fire under me because yeah, I was like doing better in school, but it numbed out that restlessness throughout the day. But then at night, it like hit me like a train. Meds would wear off, and I was like 10 times what I was before just throughout the day. But now it was like all at night, all past 5 p.m., all when I'm like supposed to be winding down my day because like I got revved up. And it's literally just like a restlessness in my mind. Like I had a comfortable lifestyle. Like there's no reason for me to be like stressing or worrying about anything. And, I would find anything to worry about. Like, someone's gonna break into the house. Like I'm losing my mind, like I said, like my shoes are not in straight line, all those things, which obviously all led to like different diagnoses. And ultimately, at a young age, you're kind of like, what the fuck is going on right now in my head? Like, why am I this way? And why do I have to like take things to, combat this? I should be able to just exist in the world and not have these types of things. And ultimately it just brought on like this level of stress in my brain that, that is what I started running from, is like that stress, that intensity of emotions and feelings. And it would turn into like anger and rage. And I just hated that. Hated it, and I was basically willing to do whatever it took to like quiet that beast within me that was like always trying to find its way out.
Were you scared of yourself?
For sure. Like that night that I described, like that was like a good representation of me being like just scared of myself. When I ended up like curling up in a ball in my room, and like, there's a bunch of nights like that in my life. So that was just kind of like the first time when you get like a blimp of reality when you're holding a knife and screaming at your parents and saying you're going to kill yourself and you're 15 years old. Like, it's scary as fuck. You're like, what is wrong with me? But also like, how am I capable of like being this way when years ago I was like this innocent kid playing all the sports and, always had good manners. It just felt like everything happened so quick. And now it was like a different person.
Say you're you now, and
Yeah.
you could go back in time into that situation specifically at your grandma's house. You know little Thomas is in the bathroom because you know what happened. Would you go into the bathroom? What would you say to him?
I wouldn't have like stopped him in his tracks because that little Thomas was gonna do that in a different way anyways. Fast forwarding to the next day where I was in the emergency room and like wasn't high, I would have been like super reassuring to myself that, you're gonna struggle for a long time in trying to figure this out. And everything that you go through is gonna be, important in like the process of allowing you to figure it out. Like everything that I went through throughout the years, like whether it was different treatment programs or just different terrible, shitty situations that I put myself in, they all taught me what not to do or like what I could do differently. Just believe that one day it gets better. You will figure out how to deal with your mind, your emotions. You will find the path forward that doesn't require you to take drugs, not just like on my own, but like not even prescription meds. Today, like I literally don't take any of the meds that I was prescribed my whole life. So, I've figured out what to do in my day-to-day life to kind of like offset the different things that, would come up, like whether it was anxiety and depression or ADHD or insomnia. Being outside, being active on a daily basis was the key for me. Like I learned that when I was like 16, 17 years old. It just didn't really like set in for me until I was 23, but I knew it in the back of my mind that that was like a route that I could take and like it would serve me in almost the same way that everything that I was trying to take.
Did you always have a shred of hope, or did you ever completely lose hope?
Say there's like multiple moments where I felt like I lost all hope and I would say it, I give up, or maybe there'd be nights where like I would take a few extra pills, just maybe hoping it would just end. Ultimately, like in my darkest moments, whenever I was like truly sitting there questioning, do I want to kill myself or do I want to keep living? That's where like any of the hope that was there would always show itself to me and give me this opportunity to choose the path that wasn't death. I think it was always there, just like was kind of deep within me. It took me getting to like low, super low moments. I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And every time it got to that point, I knew that like I had to keep fighting and I didn't want to die. At the end of the day, like no matter what I was doing, like I was still a nice kid everywhere I went in my life, sports teams, jobs, treatment centers, whatever. Everyone always told me who I was as a person and how I was as a person was unique and obviously like a lot of potential, blah, 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 like all those things. You brush it off in those moments because you're like, yeah, like everyone fucking tells you that. But then you get to a point where you're like questioning if you want to die and you're like, everyone tells me that I have a lot of potential and I need to figure out how I can, seize that.
It's kind of like you're digging your own grave in the soil, and at some point you hit the earth's core and you're like,
Mm.
oh shit, there's a hot, warm life energy at the core here. There's something here. It doesn't just go all the way down into outer space and I'm lost in an abyss. Do you think
Totally.
everyone can get to that point, or are there some people that dig, 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 and they don't hit the core at some point and they're just lost?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that like everyone can get to that point where like, they see that there is another path and you learn and you meet people who have been there and have pushed through it, no matter the situation, whether it's an addict or someone who's, just deep in depression or struggling with like any type of illness that has like brought them down to this low point. I feel like it's like within all of us at a certain point, like everyone else's input is almost irrelevant. It just comes to you and yourself. I just had to be honest with myself, especially in addiction. You're quite literally just numbing yourself out from even having that honest conversation with yourself. Like you're just always high. So it's like you're not going to have a moment where you're just sitting there having those contemplations. When I ended up being clean, it was like I literally couldn't get drugs for like a 24-hour period. So I'm like basically starting with the withdrawal process. And now I'm like having these like intense combos where it's like I can't run away from it right now, no matter how much you push it away. Eventually it's going to come up and you're going to have to face it.
What did you believe or think about yourself back then when you were in it that really turned out to be untrue and you would never think now?
Yeah, I mean, like this kind of goes against what I was just saying. When like I had hope like deep down, but I would constantly tell myself that like there was no hope. Like I was trying to convince myself that I was never going to figure it out. I was always going to be trapped in this cycle. When you're like really in that state, whether it's addiction or just like a mental health thing, you feel trapped. Like there's no, like you can't really see a way out. It's like you are like deep in this cave. You can't see where the light is and you like don't know the way out. And you're just stuck there, like kind of suffering and hoping that maybe someone comes down and finds you, or that like you can crawl your way to a point where you see the light again. You're screaming for help. Other people are trying to get to you, but like you just can't connect and they don't know where you are. You don't know how to get to where they are. At a certain point, you just stop screaming for help and you just like stay in it until, maybe you get like a second wind or whatever, and then you can work to climb your way out of it. Because everyone told me I had so much potential, it was like, I'm a fucking failure, like
Mm.
everyone telling me I can do X, Y, and Z. I have so much potential in different ways. And here I am like deep in this cave.
You talk about other people, screaming to you, trying to connect, trying to get to you. I think a lot of people listening to this can relate to that side of things, where they can see someone that they care about and love going through addiction, mental health issues, suffering, struggle, whatever it is. I think there's less people that really know what the throes of it look like from the inside. For those people that maybe haven't experienced the depth of this type of suffering themselves, like walk me through physically, somatically in your body. What does it feel like when you are in your room, you are restless, discontent, and you're about to go get drugs?
I mean, in my body, it's like restlessness is like a good way to describe it, where it's like almost like an itch that you're, trying to scratch that like just like won't go away. At least for me, it was always like this heaviness, like quite literally on my shoulders. My head was constantly spinning. It literally felt like my thoughts were like at a million miles a minute, just like going crazy in my brain. When I'm thinking of like going to get drugs in those moments, it's like, basically from the moment that someone tells me that they have the drug that I want or whatever I'm trying to get, like if I get the text that says, yeah, come pick it up in 30 minutes, like it already started to like relieve itself.
Wow.
Knew
So
that
before you took the drug.
yeah, before I took the drug, like when I was on the way to pick up the drug, it was like I already took the drug. The withdrawal or any of that type of feeling that started to come up was already starting to dissipate as I got closer to the drug. And then once I took it, then it was like the ultimate relief. I was gonna say release, but it definitely wasn't a release. Just a relief of how I felt in my body, how I felt in my mind, and, slowed it all down and made it kind of just disappear. I could go from worrying about 10 different things to not worrying about anything. Pretty much every drug I did, I snorted it. So that whole process as well was like its own version of getting high. That all played into it. Like the closer I got to actually doing it, there's multiple steps I had to take to get it, do it, and then take it. Every step of the way, it was like the shoulders would be relieved, my mind would calm down. It just seemed to like fix all of the problems. I couldn't articulate it like that at the time. It was just like I just was doing it to get that relief.
Before you like picked up your phone or when you woke up in the morning or when you were going to bed that night, did you ever tell yourself, I'm going to promise myself I'm not going to do that ever again? Or did you ever try to fight it? Try to do anything to stop yourself?
No. It was basically like once I turned that corner and started using specifically, it was kind of just like that was what it was. Like I remember the first time I took Xanax, like I was in my garage with one of my friends and I looked at him like probably 45 minutes later and I was like, I'm gonna be addicted to this. Like I'm gonna do this every single day. And I said that like outright. I basically had two lives, it's like the life that my daytime, like I was a different person. Like I was high, but like I was kind of like in this like medium high. I could eat dinner with my parents and then not think anything of it. And then at nighttime, it was like I snuck out of my room at the moment that my parents closed their door, and I was out of my room until 5:30 in the morning. An hour after would get home, my mom was waking me up to go to school.
If you could now sit down with your mom or your dad on one of the worst nights where they were worrying about your life, what
Yeah.
would you tell them?
Uh, that's a tough one. They ended up getting divorced when I was like 17. I feel like they did the best they could to try to navigate it and like work together to figure it out. And ultimately, they'll say it wasn't my fault, but like I know the stress and pressure I brought to our household definitely created a division in the household. I would honestly encourage them to focus on their relationship and, not let all of this get in between. Like my rules and everything just got way looser after that. That nighttime version of me basically became 24/7. I just did whatever I wanted all the time, got kicked out of school, like, all the things. So I was basically just like at home all day getting high with other kids who got kicked out of school. I would tell them to focus on their relationship, give themselves space, take care of themselves so that, they'd be more able to help me in whatever way that they could.
I know we've been talking a lot about your teen use, but even in your young adulthood use, can you recall a time where it was the first moment where you were like, I might have a shot at changing?
Fast forward, like I, went to treatment a few times, wilderness therapeutic boarding school, and pretty quickly after that, like tried to go to college, dropped out of college, and just knew that I didn't want to go to college. And obviously, I was, getting high basically the moment I got out of boarding school, and I just knew that like I wanted to leave South Carolina where I was born, and I got like lucky, honestly. Like I was like selling drugs, met someone who I was selling drugs to who owned a successful rolling paper company. It gave me an opportunity to move to Los Angeles, do social media for this rolling paper company. That was in my addict dream. You know what I mean? Like to go to Los Angeles, my job was to quite literally smoke weed all day, post about it on Instagram, give rolling papers to different people for like, probably a year and a half, 2 years. Like I was chilling in the sense of being an addict. I had a nice place to live. I had a steady paycheck coming in and I was getting paid to get high. I quite literally created the perfect scenario for my addict self. Like I had drugs all the time, so it made it easier. And then, ultimately the addiction kind of took over and I ended up losing the job and was then left to just like selling the drugs, seeking the drugs, acquiring the drugs, always having drugs, which like not only brought me to like some of like the scariest moments of my life, just like some of the scariest rooms, some of the scariest places, but it also put a lot of pressure on me to keep my addiction alive. And, at this point, once I lost the job, I was probably like 21. And, that was kind of a wake up call to me. I'm like, okay, like the sick dream lifestyle that I had created for myself that was like perfect for the way I wanted to be was like falling apart. You need to like get your shit together and not keep going down this path by starting to sell drugs. It's like one of those movies where like someone starts selling drugs with a group of people and then one day he's like, I don't want to sell drugs anymore. And they're like, you can't just not sell drugs anymore. I kind of got myself into, some sticky situations like revolving money and whatnot that made it so like I had to stay in it. And I was, still using a bunch. It just created this super vicious cycle where I would mess up some money and then mess up some more money to fix that problem. And then now I had this other problem and it was just kind of like ongoing. And now I was like fighting for my life, like quite literally for drugs, but also against like people who like were not happy with the way I was doing things. That was scary as fuck. Like the only way I'm getting out of these different situations is by doing something else that's, not honest and not good. The only way I'm going to get out of this if I like get clean and like get a real job and like pay these people off. From 21 to 23, I had a lot of moments where it was not only dark because of my addiction, but just like dark because of like the places addiction had brought me, the things that addiction made me do, and the repercussions that came from it.
What was the worst?
Yeah, I mean, some of those things, like, I definitely can't I'm not gonna say right here, but I would I would say, like, I was helping this guy sell a bunch of drugs that he had and that he couldn't get rid of, and the drugs that he was, not able to sell and that I was trying to sell weren't, like, good drugs, and I had, like, given a bunch of them to somebody, and ultimately, like, the guy who I gave them to was like, "I'm not gonna give you any money for this because it's not good," and that put me in a deep hole, like, it was like $15,000 hole. This guy is like, obviously calling me every day, pulling up to my apartment every day. And then he rented the apartment 3 doors down from me. I'm like, now in my apartment, he's 3 doors down every day, anytime he's pulling up to my apartment. When he needed some money, like he would come knocking on my door. You know, I had someone over, like anything, like didn't matter. Like he was banging on my door. And, at this point, like I'm the worst off I've ever been as far as like my usage with painkillers and other pills. And so like, most nights I'm just like completely fried. And, like now I'm like running from this. It's like super, super dark feeling knowing that you walk out of your apartment, like this guy is basically demanding slash holding money over your head. Obviously I like made things right, but I quite literally dug like a hole that was like, almost like threatening my life to like in a different way. Just like waking up every day. My priority was getting pills and someone 3 doors down's priority was like getting some money out of me. And it was a terrible existence.
I'm
Terrible.
sure. That sounds extremely scary. And I think it's hard, honestly, because I've heard your recovery side of things, and I want to talk more about that. But it's hard
Yeah.
for me to really imagine how you go from that to like Thomas, who runs multiple
Yeah.
miles a day, who is clean, who has a family of his own now. What were some of the first things you started doing to actually change?
I had to get out of LA if like I was gonna have a chance. Like my parents had at this point had completely like cut me off, like communication, financially, like all that shit. And so I was really like alone in this. It was like a 24-hour period where I couldn't source any more painkillers. And at that point, like I was like, I had to wake up and sort of peel off my side table to even get out of bed. I never bought more painkillers at a time than I could like swallow at once. Like if a cop pulled me over, every day I had to pick up my drugs. And just on this day, I couldn't find them. Broke everything in my apartment, had a breakdown searching all over the floor in my drawers, looking for a piece of a pill anywhere. We were talking about hope earlier. Like I did have a moment where I was looking in the mirror and like saw this version of me now that's like 120 pounds, long hair, like looked like complete shit, crying because was losing my mind trying to find a pill. And I like had this moment of just like, I think maybe clarity right now, like is an opportunity for you to like figure this out. Ended up going through the withdrawals and stuff on my bathroom floor by myself. Had a sleeping bag there, was just sweating, cold, throwing up. My dog's pooping, peeing all over the floor. I couldn't take care of myself, couldn't take care of my dog. 5, 6 days later, once I like literally didn't leave my apartment once in that entire time, I ended up like getting in my car and it was like I had a calling, like something in the back of my mind, like you're gonna go to a national park and just like go sit by a river or something. And so that's what I did. I went and drove up to Kings Canyon and spent like 3 days, no service. Actually, I had broken my phone like in that process of freaking out. So like I didn't even have my phone. Went out to a national park that I'd been to before and like kind of let it all out of just like what the fuck is my life right now? There was no treatment option. There was no like there was nothing like that I could do to help myself besides that. And so I just, went to different national parks. I went to Catalina Island.
You
Just
weren't
needed to keep
craving during that time?
I was craving for sure. I was
You
craving for
were.
sure. Honestly, like in that first, month or so, if I was back in LA, like I would have a drink here and there, and then I realized like a drink would lead to Coke, and then the Coke would lead to me trying to find pills. There was one night where I drank a little bit too much, ended up doing some Coke, and caught myself in the moment about to text one of my pill dealers, and I was like, "Fuck! Like I have to leave. Like I cannot like be here at all." Right after that moment, the next morning, I drove out to Joshua Tree and like started car camping, spending my days like in the national park, eating like camp food. Like I wasn't like eating at the restaurants or anything.
Since I've heard about your restlessness as a kid and like, how do I just survive in this world being who I am? This was maybe the first time, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were like, I think there's a way for me to survive in this body, in this mind, in a way that feels good to me. Is that the first time you started seeing like another
Yeah,
way?
for sure. I love that movie Into the Wild. Like, I don't know if you've seen that. Have you seen that movie? But, like one of my favorite parts about that movie is just like all the different like random people he met along the way. And that was kind of happening to me. I would go to these national parks and like, yeah, I don't have contact with any of these people to this day, but like I meet a random old couple at a campground and like end up having like deep conversations with them about like where I was at in my life and like what all I had just gone through and like even at like gas stations or like definitely in national parks or like different trails or sitting next to a river. Like I was just talking to people. I was starting to become like this better version of myself just through these conversations. And that was part of like Joshua Tree too. I had like a really intense conversation with someone at the Dollar General there. It's just like the guy working behind the counter. We ended up having like a long discussion just about life. And yeah, like you said, like I started to feel like maybe I could like do this. When I got to the desert, it kind of solidified it for me. I could give myself a shot at it here. At this point, I'm still not talking to my parents or any of that. So like, again, I'm like on my own trying to figure this out besides like the friends and the random people that I was meeting. I knew if I could get settled in the desert in some way, shape or form that, I had a chance to restart hiking and just like sightseeing and like looking at the vast openness. Like it was like emotional to me because it was like I literally had been numbed out for so long that I hadn't really taken in anything. Like I had always kind of been a sunset guy, but like it was like sunset after I snorted some pills in my car. Like, I was never really there to like take it all in. And, out there it was just so vast and open and God, like it just shifted like my perspective on my life and like allowed me to like think deeply about everything I had been through. And also like if I were to restart now, like it wasn't too late to like fix all the problem. Not like I wasn't gonna be able to fix everything, but like fix all like the present problems that were wrong, like whether it was like my relationships or like financial things with people or whatever, like I knew if I was there, I could fix it and at least give myself a better opportunity to fix it. So that's what I did.
Did someone ever say anything to you in one of those conversations that you still think about today?
It's really interesting. I ended up like getting like a cheap RV off of Facebook and living on this like vacant property out there. And I like needed air conditioning in the day. Like I didn't have AC or electricity. So I would like always go to this bakery and just kind of sit there. And then one day, like I asked them if they had a job opening and I had worked at bakeries before. So I, ended up getting a job at this bakery and the owner of the bakery, her name is Mary Lee. Her son was like in active addiction. They really like took me in and like they always made sure I had food. If I ever needed like a shower or anything, like I could lean on the people that I now was working with at the bakery. There's not like one like thing that someone said to me, but it was kind of just like a compilation of all these small moments of people really taking a liking to this version of me. Whereas, again, being super vulnerable about my life, living in the desert by myself in a broken down RV, similar to Into the Wild. Like I just felt like they were all curious about that. So it led to like deep discussion. So there was a guy who I would get wood from. His name was Chuck, who like lived on the corner of this road that led to my RV. He just like parked his truck there every day to sell piles of wood, and I'll literally go sit with him for like hours. He was like a 80-year-old man. Even the people who were closest to my RV, old couple who had lived there for, maybe 50 or 60 years. The lady who lived there, she would invite me over for coffee in the morning. And, basically every day I'd go over there, have coffee, then I'd go to the bakery, go to the national park and go watch the sunset. And like hiking was just like slow. And I was like, maybe I'll try to run some of these trails to get to the peak faster. I was running the same trails pretty consistently. So like I could see that I was getting better at running. And like where maybe the first time I tried to do some like 3 mile loop trail, it would take me 40 minutes and I had to stop 20 times. 6 months later, I'm like doing it like 4 times. There was still something missing. Like I had now created this bubble where everything's going good for me now. But like out in the world, there's still a lot of burnt bridges that I had yet to rebuild. I knew I needed to spice it up. So I started like inviting like one by one, basically people who I'd fucked up my relationships with out to the desert to like spend a night or two with me pretty primitively, like camping basically or sleeping in the RV with me. That's when things like really started to shift. Having this super clear mind, I had created this beautiful little world out in the desert. Now I'm like inviting people into that space and into this version of me that they hadn't known, like my mom, my dad, some of my friends that had fucked over. I'm on the right path, like I'm doing the right thing, and I feel good about myself now, especially after having a lot of the conversations I had. I even had like my therapist from the boarding school I went to come out there, who I had like built up some sort of resentment towards throughout the years. I was just content in that life. But I also like knew in the back of my mind, I'm an ambitious person. I had like big visions, big goals. Like I was starting to create those. And it really just like opened my eyes to that potential that since I was young, everyone told me I had.
I think a lot of people sometimes have this misconception that when things start getting better, it's easy and it's like pushing a ball down a mountain. It just keeps rolling and builds its own momentum, which it does, but there are still, at least for me in my journey, like there were still divots that it ran into, walls that it slammed up against as I built up the momentum downhill and things got easier. For you, were things still hard and what were those things?
When I was in the desert, like honestly, life was great. Like I didn't really have, it felt like that, like something rolling down a hill and like it just kept going, like kept getting better. And ultimately, like, one of my old friends comes out there and like he always knew me as the guy who was around with drugs. And now I was like, he wanted to come spend time with me as a guy who was living in the middle of the desert. And he had like a super successful business and, lived a really fast paced lifestyle. So that's kind of, he just wanted a piece of what I was experiencing. He comes out there. We ended up like getting really, really close, connecting through like his visits out there. He came out there a couple times. He ended up like bringing his whole family out there. And yeah, eventually like he offered for me to like come live with him back in LA. There wasn't like an official title, but like I would say like potentially like as like a house assistant. We're living in like a big house back in LA. I was just like, well, make sure that we're, working out, eating right, getting sleep, house is clean, kind of just took care of the back end stuff. Like that was a great thing that happened, huge momentum, but it had brought me out of this like safe space that I had created. And I was back in the place where like all the shit went down. It made it really difficult to hold on to that version of me that I had created in the desert. I basically would go drive out to Malibu every single day and just like sit at the beach, try to get a piece of like what I was feeling when I was in the desert. And it just wasn't enough. While I was in the desert, like I'm not hooking up with girls, like any of that stuff. Like now I'm back in LA. My focus is like being shifted again away from like taking care of myself to now I'm not doing drugs, but like I'm like focused on girls and all the things that like made it murky waters for me again. I could tell I was like not the same, like I'd go to the gas station in the desert and be annoyed that the person in front of me is taking so long. Whereas like when I lived out there, like I was the one taking forever just talking to the person at the register. Kind of rebuilt this like anxiety within me. And you actually have mentioned her before. Like, ended up meeting Leahy, who does like breath work, and went to one of her breath work classes. And, the first breath work class, like a 16-minute breathing exercise. Didn't know anybody in the room. Had just met Leahy. I just lost my shit. Like, I was deep in like meditative state, but I was like bawling my eyes out crying. When I came out of that like state, everyone in the room was kind of like surrounding me to like support me. I was like basically having like an out of body experience where like I like didn't know what was going on. I was just losing my shit on this mat in the middle of this room with a bunch of people I didn't know. The support I felt in that moment, it was like a piece of what I was kind of seeking now that I wasn't in the desert, where I had like this breakthrough emotional moment, and which is like often what I would feel at nights when I was sitting in the desert. Like I didn't have TV or any of that. So, every night I'm just sitting there watching the fire, looking at the stars. Like some nights I would cry, some nights I would just be like dancing, listening to music, howling at the moon, like whatever I was doing. And yeah, that was like the first time where like basically in like that meditative state, I was like having visualizations of like me being there and like just kind of let it all out in that moment. And that really shifted things for me and made it possible for me to stay in LA and like stay in that situation I was in. Cause, I'd go to that breathwork class like once or twice a week, every week for like 2 years. And ultimately, like that shifted it and made it more real. Like I talk about like my time in the desert almost as if I was in treatment. Like it was like this safe place.
In the conventional 12-step recovery recommendation, they're always talking about the geographical cure, right? But I've talked to many people now, and it is not always the case that that causes more problems. It sometimes has been part of the solution for people, because I think back to the story that you told when you were young and rearranging your room. Like,
Yeah.
you were not safe in here, and so you were trying to make it safe out here. And then finally, when you were in the desert, it was like safe out there, and it allowed you to be safe in here. Would you
Yeah.
say that's true?
Totally. Like that's fast brain that I had, it forced me to slow it down because now I'm like having to problem solve. Like, how do I exist in this space? Like, I don't know how to live in an RV off grid without electricity, without water.
You still have that restless, chaotic brain somewhere in you. What do you do now that isn't drugs that helps you live?
It's best for me if most days I have, from the moment I wake up to the time I go to bed, like I know what I'm doing. In the morning, I have an activity. It's like movement based, being outside. As long as I get out there and do something at that time of the day, it's like it just sets me up to have a better day. And I can literally feel the difference if I don't. That allows me to like, slow down and focus on the tasks that need to be done as far as work goes for the day. I always have like basically a second activity already planned every single day, whether it's tennis, pickleball, basketball, like maybe I'll go for another run. In the morning, it's always by myself. Typically at night, the activity is like I'm with people, and that just, gives me like a sense of community. And anyone who's like around me on a day-to-day basis, they know that like at any given moment, you could just hear me taking like 5 deep, super deep, long breaths. People are like, why are you like sighing? I'm like, I'm just like slowing myself down right
I do
now.
the same thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It has to be
Everyone's
like
like,
exaggerated,
what's
or
wrong with you?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Coming home, I have a girlfriend, she's got a son, we're making dinner, slowing things down at the end of the night where her son will go to sleep. I kind of have like this hour to myself. Now I'll put that into something like personal passion projects, and like whether it's like my clothing brand, or most days, I would say like 5 out of 7 days a week, I get to that point every day where I'm just like tired, I get a good night of sleep, and I wake up and kind of do the same thing.
Are you ever still scared of yourself?
I mean, I think it's different, right? Like, because I've been faced with everything, like all the drugs, like I've been faced with all the temptations I possibly could since I've gotten to the side of things. And I've literally had people like wave a bag of the pills I used to love doing right in front of my face. And, it only being us two, knowing that I could do it and no one would know. Like, I'll be in the gas station. Now they have this like kratom stuff everywhere. Like, it's always right in front of you. And running is like a really good example. And why I like take it so seriously is, when you really start falling in love with something like running, it's like you kind of build your life around it. Like, the way you're eating, the way you're sleeping, what you're putting into your body. And I've like built my routine in life around the goals I have for running. Most of the things that I would do that would make me scared of myself don't align with that. There's like the question I do have in my head is like, what happens when like running isn't the thing anymore? And being honest with myself, like one day running is just not going to serve me the way it has been the past 6 years. I've been really big on just like picking up new hobbies, like whether it's fly fishing or skiing or, whitewater kayaking, like whatever it is, I've like kind of set myself up already to be average at all these things. Like the only common denominator is that it's like outdoors. Like whatever it is has to
Me
be outside.
too. Me
Yeah.
too. And you know what? That actually makes it a lot fucking easier. You
Yeah,
can access, if you're in a place where you can access water or the mountains or a forest or the beach, you can do something. There's something that you can do. Like I need to just go stare at a mountain to feel small and feel the vastness that you were kind of talking
totally.
about.
No,
It
it's
literally is a form
awesome.
of spirituality.
100%. The feeling that I get when I'm in nature and how connected I feel to myself. Like when you're struggling in mental health, addiction, all of that, it's like you're quite literally disconnected from yourself and like your reality. And you got to disconnect from all of the rest of the world kind of to reconnect with yourself. And my desert experience was like a huge example of that. Like, obviously, there's going to be moments where it's still challenging to like, and I get depressed or whatever. But as long as I don't drift too far away from the connection with myself and I lean on the things I know work for me, I don't really need to be scared of like what that other part of me could potentially go do. I feel pretty secure in it now, even though, you never want to be like too comfortable. And that's why, like I said, like I'm like always zooming out to see how I can like basically prepare myself for anything that could come up.
That's a great feeling. Like once you are able to befriend yourself and be connected to yourself.
I completely agree. It's yeah, like those mountains are huge, and just like getting to like fully be in it, like that's
And it's
just,
that immersion.
yeah,
We're needing a bigger body than what we have to hold like how much
yeah,
shit is going on. And so
for
I
sure.
like nature for that reason because I'm looking at these like the skyline or I'm looking at the sunset, I'm looking at the ocean and I'm like, that's huge. It can hold all this. My
Yeah,
body, my corpse, my own flesh might not be able to, but I can throw it into this environment and that can
yeah.
hold it. It's the same exercise that you were trying to do kind of in many ways when you were younger, but just in a more effective way.
Whenever I dive back in and think about all those times, it's just hard to believe that I did, you know, ultimately like claw my way out of that cave and like find the light again. And yeah, it's one of like the craziest feelings ever is like, getting to a point where you see the light again. And I figured out a way to like keep the light there. And it is through those moments like that we're talking about. And like life isn't as serious as we make it. Like everything that we like stress about and like the pressures we put on ourselves, it's like all put on ourselves. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
maybe our parents or other people are putting pressure on us, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really like weigh on you nearly as much as like whatever is going on inside your brain. You know, obviously I still put pressure on myself. So I always want to be doing more, whatever. It's okay to like, slow down and go watch the sunset. Tomorrow will be there, but it still just feels like the beginning of like a hike that I'm on. It's only going to get better in terms of like how I see my life.